Then I would like to move on to, and of course everyone can come in a bit later as well, and MEP might have a few words to say as well. Now I would like to move to His Excellency Andreas von Brandt, the EU Ambassador to Afghanistan.
Thank you, Junaid, if I may, and thank you all panelists for the excellent presentations. I agree with a lot of things, and I don't see myself now in the need to necessarily contradict a lot, but I will focus on a few points, probably not always in chronological order, but because Paimana had this powerful statement on the 16th of August, and I was there myself. I think that was very, very important because for one, it showed your really, the feelings and what happened on that day, and I had a bit the same perception about how we all, not that I was laughing there, but I thought we have not really grasped the depth and the importance of that moment. And I would say, had it happened in our own country, had it happened in Europe, I think this backlash or this feeling would have been discussed much more widely. So in that I completely agree with you. I would also mention a couple of more innovations or progress indicators, for example, health. Also, as funny as it may sound when you look at the corruption allegations, but also budgeting, financial management, clean drinking water, and also development of media. I think that you're all familiar with that, but I think it's also important to stress that once in a while, because not everything was bad, or not everything was a failure in this 20 years of Afghanistan. Then, you mainly engaged then in a criticism of Westerners, a bit of this colonial attitude, and the need for Afghans to find yourself, to talk to yourself. I think I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm not here as a historian to talk about the last 40 years. Many failures, many mistakes were made. But I would also say, for example, in Bonn, when you presented as the Afghan said, I mean, failures were made, mistakes were made, and I would agree that it would have been probably better to include some Taliban representative at that time. But I would also say that there wasn't the Afghan voice. It's always very difficult to find the Afghan voice, to be quite frankly, still today. But I think what it shows us is the importance, and this is what I liked also about this all-Afghan panel, to help Afghans, also opposition Afghans, to come together and develop a plan for the future. I must say, and then I come back to the feelings, probably it's not so easy in this catastrophe, but I would say I don't see a united opposition or a united, how can I say, ideas. It's not so much about opposition, and of course we're not in favor of armed opposition, but in any democracy or in any political struggle, there has to be a clear alternative presented, you know, and I don't, quite frankly, see that enough at the moment, at least. To come to what you said about Pakistan is also very important, and I think we are not speaking enough about Pakistan. That is probably all I can say, but I agree with that. Then, starting with Horia Musadegh, I think what you say on the overall restrictive, the increasing restrictions, the human rights violations is all what we are seeing. What I don't agree with is that the UN or no other or any other actor, Western or international actor, would pay money to the Taliban. We are precisely not doing it. I mean, the whole idea of humanitarian assistance is that it does not go to any government or de facto government entities. Of course, you can find probably fraud, you can find allegations, you can make allegations, you can find misbehavior like in any other part of the world, in any other operations. You know, we have been spending, I mean, the collective international community has basically delivered food and other assistance to 19 million Afghans. And I think the good thing is also that the catastrophe of hunger that was portrayed in last September and October was avoided. I'm not saying that people are not suffering hunger, and there are even 50,000 people in this phase 4, which is called starvation, so this is all very serious, but it's also not any longer the case that we see entire Afghanistan on the brink of starvation. And I think there, this massive international response, which was the largest ever in the UN history, had its positive impact. I'm not saying this is sustainable, and I'm not saying that it will happen again next winter. It will be a very difficult winter, and it's a very difficult time ahead. And again, you have to bring all these allegations to the fore, but it's not true conceptually that the UN or that we are paying the Taliban. Actually, the European Echo Agency has been active for 20 years, actually longer than 20 years, but throughout the time also in Taliban-controlled areas. That is precisely the idea of humanitarian assistance, to be apolitical, to be independent. And we have now reached even areas where the Taliban did not allow us to reach. So sometimes the needs are even bigger because we are able to reach those territories. You know, so it's not always that the problems are bigger. It is also that we, for the first time, reach certain remote areas where we have not been before. Then I would probably say one thing, because you know, we are receiving, by we I mean the international community, we're receiving very contradictory criticism. On the one hand, you have the school of thought or the group of people saying, you have left us, you have neglected us, you are running away, you're not paying the 75% public expenditure, which was, quite frankly, mind-blowingly unsustainable, you know, but that was a fact. The international donor money amounted to 75% of public expenditure. So this school of thought says you run away, you don't pay enough, you don't do anything, and the other school of thought says you're meddling in our affairs, you are colonial, you don't let us decide on our so I mean, maybe there are truths to both sides, but it's also not very easy to find there the right, the balanced approach, because I mean, if the European unity, the European Union and its member states have paid more money together with the humanitarian than in the Republican time. And this is not to say that we are paying for the Taliban. You know, we are paying more money because the country is in dire straits, and because we have a standstill. We have had a standstill of the economy due to many factors. By the way, it is not just the frozen assets, like many claim. It is also the level, the lack of trust in the economy. You know, commercial activities came to a standstill because people don't trust, don't trade anymore, or at least not to that level. And then there's also the Taliban to blame, because a lot of these financial regulations, the anti-terror legislation that they could implement, is not being implemented. So also there, it's not just the West to blame for the asset freeze. By the way, the asset freeze has not happened in Europe, it has happened in the US. So it is a very gray picture, I would say. And the other criticism is that you are engaging, you West are constantly engaging with the Taliban. Quite frankly, in all my 20-year diplomatic career, I have never spoken as little to anyone in a country like in these last months. I mean, the fact that I have met 3 times a Talib, or that the institutions and the special envoy Thomas Nicholson has probably been 3 times in meetings with the Taliban and twice in Kabul, is actually just not an indication of how engaged we are. We are rather not engaged, you know. So what I'm saying is we don't, while we're not believing in complete silence, because diplomacy is usually not silence. You know, we speak with North Korea, we speak with Iran, we speak with Russians, we speak with Belarusians. I mean, this is the normal job, and I think due to this 20 years of war and this very polarized environment, people are sometimes assuming that we should just stop any interaction. But diplomacy is not stopping anything. It's not being silent completely, you know. And now you can argue that we are doing the wrong things here and there. But what I don't want to say is that we are necessarily very actively engaging with the Taliban. We are, and that is true. European Union delegation is the only Western player back in Kabul. This is a great responsibility. There have been intense discussions on the pros and cons. We have seen it over these last 6-7 months rather as a good step, because it helps us to have a feeler on the ground. It has helped us to also solve a few direct problems in whether human rights, safe passage, humanitarian. But it's also true that the climate has worsened, you know. We see more restrictions, we have mentioned them for women, for media, for human rights defenders, but we also see corruption increasingly, you know. It's not that this beautiful picture of the Taliban as at least the non-corrupt entity is also not true. And I think what is very important for the future, apart from the human rights considerations that are equally important, is the whole financial, the financial aspects, the budgeting, because as we know, money is fungible, and it cannot be that the Taliban de facto authorities increasingly collect their own resources, pay for their increasing police type state, while they request us to pay basic services or to pay health and agriculture, which, by the way, as I said before, we are not doing into the official governance structures. You know, we are doing this through the UN or through NGOs. Last points to come to, 1 second, Bashir, yes, CT and terror links have been a bit neglected, also for lack of in-country presence. It has not played so much of a role anymore. I would say, I mean, we have been talking 2/3 of the time on human rights and women's rights, which I think is important, but we should not neglect these terror and also financial aspects. You know what I also wanted to say on your points, which had a very comprehensive outlook on democracy and all of that. I would say that it's good ideas to focus on the non-violent movements, and I would entirely agree with you in a how can I say, outside of the current context, but I would like to see those players that we should work on in Afghanistan. You know, it is very difficult at the moment to see an alternative, not because we have no imagination to think of an alternative, but it is simply the powers that be, and usually diplomats have to work with those that are somehow calling the shots, and that I'm not saying we are doing this, because as I've just explained, we have a very cautious approach, and I think if there are a few good things at the moment, it is that there is a tremendous consensus on the non-recognition in the entire Western world, and I actually don't see that changing in the near future. And there's consensus on women's rights, human rights, inclusive governance, also the right political and ethnic mix, by the way, shared, I would say, even by China and Russia. But I don't see these movements that we could politically work with. I mean, we are supporting human rights defenders, we are supporting civil society, and we continue to do so. But very last point, when you say you need time, I also agree with that in principle, but you know, we have been confronted in September with the request by the media, by parliament, the strong demand to evacuate up to 100,000 Afghans at risk. We were blamed, we were confronted with the idea that an economy is collapsing, that up to 40 million people will be close to hunger. I think there is little time for, you know, for patience or long deliberation. So I see what you mean, of course. The right political way ahead needs time, but in my recent year we have been confronted with shockingly urgent decisions. And I'm not saying we always make the right decision, but I think we have been navigating quite okay through this economic and humanitarian disaster, and I really hope, and we're working hard to avoid that in the future, or to help avoiding that, because at the end, as I said at the beginning, it is for Afghans also to run the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency, and I hope you're staying a bit for a question and answer session as well. So we'll take that from there.